Hello students, now we will be discussing the significance of studying history. Why study history? What is the significance of studying history? History is the study of past events that shaped the modern world. It involves critical thinking. It is a process through which people reflect the past, observe the present, and envisage the future. It is a multidisciplinary subject. For example, it involves anthropology, economics, politics, law, and science. It makes people aware of diversity, majority-minority relations, and emphasizes cultural coexistence. History is about inquiry, so a student of history would have to go through the process of historical inquiry. Say, for example, in this slide, we see a picture of a wagon. Looks like people are celebrating, and there are spectators who has joined the celebration. Yes, it was the 4th of July, American Independence Day celebration in Washington, D.C. in 2017. At that time, I was an adjunct professor in Washington, D.C., and I had the opportunity to go and join the celebration. So it was a joyous moment for all the Americans and other people, say for example, the tourists or students or visitors like me. They all enjoyed the celebration. So what does the slide show? For me as a historian, I started thinking, so what is this special about the wagon? So perhaps it was during the Revolutionary War in America from 1775 to 1783. The horse and the wagons were popular means of transport at the time. So now in 2017, people are rejoicing, remembering the past, and also celebrating what they have achieved. Americans are celebrating their independence, the independence they got from the control of British government. In the War of Independence, people, the Americans, particularly of British background, the white Americans, the patriots, they fought for independence. The war took place for several years, so the Americans, the patriots, the Native Americans, the African Americans who were slaves at that time, they also took part in the American Revolutionary War. So the significance of 4th of July is that the revolutionaries signed the American Declaration of Independence. So it was a very positive forward steps for all the Americans. As I said, that the student of history or historians have to go through a process of historical enquiry. If a certain incident has happened in the current time, they will try to understand the background of the incident. They will try to understand the historical background of the incident. For example, this slide shows people holding placard. So what does this symbol stand for? That would straight come to their mind. So I attended this rally just to see what was going on. Why the people protesting against the travel ban. So I went there to see how the protest was taking place. So it was a peaceful protest. It was near the White House, and people peacefully protested against President Trump's executive order of travel ban. So they stood for the equality of all people. This placard shows that people, the protesters, are asking for liberty and justice for all people. And this slogan reminded me of the American Revolutionary War that took place from 1775 to 1783. The revolutionaries endorsed the ideology of the English political philosopher John Locke on freedom and equality. John Locke's ideology was natural right to life, liberty, and property. So he advocated natural rights to life, liberty, and property. He also advocated liberty, equality, and fraternity that was endorsed by the French revolutionaries later in 1789. So the American revolutionaries during the American Revolution War, they endorsed John Locke's ideology, and the American revolutionary slogan was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So this symbol shows that people are still protesting for liberty and justice in the American society. In this slide, we see the writing Black Lives Matter and Confront White Supremacy. This slide also took me to the historical past. As I was walking in the National Mall near the White House in Washington, D.C. in September 2017, this banner, Black Lives Matter, drew my attention. And then the placard, Confront White Supremacy. So it tells us that America has issues. There are issues of civil rights, equality for all Americans is needed. So the Black Lives Matter movement, it started in 2013. So it was but it soon gained momentum. As we know that historically there was this John Law's legalized black segregation in the southern states. Later in the 50s and 1960s, there was the civil rights movement, and we have heard of Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous speech, I Have a Dream. He called for equal civil and economic rights and an end to racism in the United States. In 1964, the Civil Rights Act was passed to end racial segregation, and in 1965, African Americans were granted voting rights. But still, in today's society, this banner, Black Lives Matter, shows that African Americans are being discriminated in the American society. So, as a historian, I started thinking about this banner Black Lives Matter movement, which was found in 2013 when an American man was acquitted for shooting an African American teenager to death. Then the movement, Black Lives Matter movement, came to public attention after the unarmed 18-year-old Michael Brown, who was not armed, in the city of Ferguson, Missouri, was shot by a white police officer. So this led to riots in Ferguson, in Missouri, in the United States. And there were other riots earlier in 1992, the Los Angeles riots. So that's the reason the Black Lives Matter banner is there. As I said, historical inquiry is very important in the discipline of history. We see an incident happening in the present, then we go back to the past and try to find the history of the present event. So in May 2020, a horrendous incident again took place in America. On 25th May 2020, an unarmed African American, an African American man named George Floyd, who did not carry any arms, he was killed by a white American police officer in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. So the incident took place in Minneapolis, in Minnesota, in the United States, but soon the outrage against discrimination and the slogan for equality to all was in America, in many states. Then again, the outcry reached overseas. So people in Australia, people in different European countries, they were sympathetic to the African American cause. They held the banner Black Lives Matter, and they had rallies and protests. So now we see a local event, a local incident in America, in Minnesota, touched the people. Many Americans of all colors both black and non-black, and they marched and they protested against the injustice done to the African Americans. And this protest reached out from America nationally to internationally. Overseas people protested against the injustice and discrimination against the African Americans. So, history provides us insight. History empowers us to think historically about the world and understand who we are and how we got to the present, and guides us to the future. Say, for example, as I have just discussed, the Black Lives Matter movement, the slogan was Black Lives Matter. There should be equality and justice for the African Americans. And then there was slogans that there needs to be change in the American society and in other societies where black people are discriminated. In the case of Australia, it is still the case of Indigenous Australians killed in police custody. So there have been slogans for reforms and change in America and in other countries. So the history provides us a sense of identity and belonging. It helps us to comprehend how the world has become a global village. It motivates us to speak for social changes and reforms to make our world a better place. Thank you.